Get your gear ready. This is a Sherpa's Guide to Innovation. Welcome to A Sherpa's Guide to Innovation, a podcast dedicated to guiding you along your innovation expedition. This is Ben Tingy, your host Sherpa. I'm delighted to welcome three Sherpas to our studio today, their first time on the podcast. Lindsay Denault, Director of Commercialization, Michael Johnson, Director of Innovation, and Emily McKenna, Investment Fund Director, all three from Carolina's healthcare system. Lindsay, Michael, and Emily, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Ben.
Thanks. Thanks for having us.
Awesome. Well, as a quick reminder for our listeners, you can engage with us on Twitter using the hashtag InnovationEngine. We'd love to hear your feedback about the podcast or send us questions or suggestions about what topics we should address in future podcasts. We'll also include Lindsay, Michael, and Emily's Twitter handles in the show notes so that you can create a conversation with them directly. On our previous episode, I interviewed Dr. Jean Wright, Vice President and Chief Innovation Officer at Carolina's healthcare system, about her experience at the Innovation Learning Network meeting in the Netherlands. And as I mentioned in that podcast, our team attends several conferences each year. And after those conferences, we typically share some highlights about our experiences and the lessons learned with each other. But we decided to share those insights more broadly with our podcast listeners. And so we have Lindsay, Michael, and Emily here with us, who recently attended the Health 2.0 11th Annual Fall Conference held in Santa Clara, California. So, Lindsay, I know that you have been to Health 2.0 a few times. Can you take a minute to give us some background about Health 2.0?
Sure. Health 2.0 is a global movement of entrepreneurs, developers, and healthcare stakeholders that are all passionate about solving healthcare problems using technology. They have local chapters all over the world. The closest one to us here in Charlotte is actually in the North Carolina RTP Triangle area. They also do events all over the world, but the flagship event is the one that we went to in Santa Clara, which is held every year. This one was the 11th annual, but it's my fourth time going, so I'm a huge Health 2.0 fan. The most unique thing for me about the conference is the live demos. So they do between 100 and 200 live demos. Those are startup companies that are doing them. They're big Fortune 500 companies that are doing them. And that's the most innovative, I think, differentiator for that conference than for other conferences, is you get to see the tech in use live, on stage, and you get to see it sort of across the spectrum of healthcare. The big, I think, difference this year for me was typically this is mostly startups and investors that are there. I'm usually one of the few health systems that are hanging out. But this time there was a huge showing from Dignity, Providence, UPMC, really a lot of the top health systems that have strong innovation and venture arms were all there and were very engaged. So the theme of it that I saw really shift this year was previously it was a lot of B2C focus on the startup side and not a lot of engagement with health systems. But this year that was very different. All the health systems were talking about being that true partner with startups to solve some of the challenges that we all face. So I thought that was a really positive change this year in the conference.
That's great to see the closer collaboration between those two groups. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well,
and just to piggyback on that, I mean, I think part of the reason for that is because with healthcare just changing so dramatically, I think health systems are starting to recognize we don't have everything figured out. I mean, there's lots of other folks out there outside of our industry and things that don't come from our typical EMR vendors or folks that we work with. And where do we go find and learn about those? And Health 2.0 is a great place for that, because that's, I think, really on the forefront of a lot of healthcare technology, more so than you get in some of these other conferences. And so I think there's probably going to be more of them in the future.
Yeah, some of the leading edge types of technology that you'll see coming out.
And I thought another really cool thing about Health 2.0 is that you see a lot of successful entrepreneurs come back that did their first demo on the live stage, and now they're participating in panels. So it's really great to see that this forum is really launching some of these companies onto the main stage.
That's great. Great launching pad.
And for us going to Health 2.0, you usually see things 2, 3, 4 years before they're at HIMSS or other large healthcare conferences. So you're really seeing the trends before a lot of other folks are aware that they're happening.
Fascinating. Well, I know that one of the themes was this idea of how healthcare is decentralizing. and that one of the drivers of that is new models of interoperability, shared databases via blockchain. For the health tech newbies among us, that myself included, Michael, could you? I know blockchain is an interest of yours, and you recently spoke at a panel here in the Charlotte metro area about blockchain. Could you give us a quick definition of blockchain and tell us a little bit about what you learned about that at the conference?
Yeah, I mean, blockchain was one of the main reasons why I wanted to go to Health 2.0 because there's a lot of focus on that, and I think that we're going to see more of that at more conferences. And blockchain, for anybody that doesn't know what that is the engine behind Bitcoin out there. So Bitcoin and blockchain really is, and the health economists defined blockchain as the trust machine, which is really kind of fundamentally what blockchain really does. It's really designed to allow folks to have no trust between each other, able to transact. So when Bitcoin came around, the whole notion was I want to be able to exchange money with Ben Tingy directly. I don't want to have to go through a third-party bank. And so in 2008, we had the financial crisis at the same time. And so it was a very attractive proposition to be able to have no third parties in between a peer-to-peer you and I transaction. And so if I don't trust Ben, then what do I trust? And blockchain is that engine that really kind of establishes that trust. There's a lot of complex cryptology within it and consensus built into it. And so the system is something that you trust in, and what goes in it has trust. And so it really redefines. I think it challenges how we actually define trust with a blockchain. So there's lots of applications for blockchain. Healthcare is one of the places that people see a lot of potential. FinTech is ahead a lot on blockchain, but every industry is looking at it and taking it seriously.
That's exciting. Well, Lindsay and Emily, did you see some cool things at Health 2.0 around blockchain?
Yeah, I think the most promising healthcare applications are rooted in what Michael said, as far as the main value proposition being removing that middleman from a transaction where parties don't trust each other. And so in healthcare, there's a number of areas where that is present. And some of those are related to supply chain, whether it's medical devices or pharmaceuticals that you're trying to track or be able to transact on, whether it's transactions between payers and health systems. Those are obviously a lot of tight, tough relationships that are, involve a ton of middlemen right now, and doing that without middlemen would be really healthcare as a disruption.
Mm. And I think just jumping on that as well, there's a lot of excitement about blockchain. It was certainly on the main stage on a number of topics and applications, but it is still relatively early compared to the number of companies we saw that are pioneering AI or interoperability. There were many more that had substantial demos in those areas, but I think that'll be something to watch and look forward to for next year.
Yeah, definitely, because when you look at the Gartner hype curve, blockchain is getting right up to the peak right before it goes down, as far as hype and inflated expectations. And so now is not the time, I don't think, to really throw all your eggs into doing blockchain applications technology, but I think right now is exactly the right time to get smart about it. I tell people that we don't want to be the Katie Couric and Brian Gumble of, it's like, what's the internet? What is it you send to it? I mean, so I think, getting our intelligence up on blockchain is the right thing to do now because, it's time to get smart about it because it's going to be able to solve problems that we can't solve today. But we need to understand not only our problems, but also the solution that blockchain offers.
And Michael alluded to banking and fintech being sort of that first entree point for blockchain. And we live in a banking town. Charlotte has a lot of the headquarters for major banks, and they've all been very vocal about having invested in a lot of blockchain technology and planning to roll a lot of that out in 2018. So we try to learn a lot from what they have done before we can figure out the best way to use it in healthcare.
Yeah, blockchain is a horizontal innovation. It's not just going to fit within one vertical of fintech. I mean, it's really going to transcend a lot of industries.
Fascinating. So it seems like it's recognized as a disruptive force, but we're still struggling to harness it. If it was able to be harnessed, where do we see some of the greatest potential? I know, Michael, you've noodled a lot about if we were able to catch it and hold on to it, where would we begin to apply it?
Yeah, I think just within institutions. I mean, one of the strategies that we have when it comes to new technologies is like we did with the internet, for example. When the internet came out, Systems like Carolyn's healthcare system wanted to have an internet for internal use. We made an intranet, something that we could put internally, get the value out of the technology, but at the same time understand how to manage it, control it, and really learn, what can we do with this. And so blockchain could be a similar thing where, it doesn't have to be immediately patient-facing. I think there's a lot of business processes that can be improved with blockchain. And so, again, understanding the problems that we'd want to solve. So there could be, blockchain solutions that we never see the light of day. You wouldn't know it's blockchain, but underneath the engine that is running it has got some blockchain in it. And so I think there's some definite experiments that need to be done before it gets more widely rolled out.
Awesome. Well, I know at Health 2.0, digital health and data analytics is a big theme of companies that are seen there. What were some of the other data types of some of the startups that are doing some cool analytic type of work that you saw?
I think we started to see a lot of companies trying to crack the nut of value-based care and how to apply some data analytics to that to be able to prepare the health systems in that way. I think, a lot of the interoperability type plays are getting towards that and maturing towards it. I think the health systems are maybe more reluctant to dive in with the earlier stage digital health companies. That was certainly one of the trends that I saw play out across the conference.
I think going back to the beginning point of more collaboration between startups and then more collaboration between different health systems and startups, I think that was something that I saw more of this time around. I think the example that I saw was with Xealth, the Providence Health spin-out, where they brought in someone who didn't have a healthcare background. He had previously led and exited more on the consumer tech side with Boost Mobile and Swipe, and setting him loose inside the health system and letting him figure out, what challenges there are and build a business around that was a different approach than we had seen other health systems take to solving challenges in a scalable, commercially viable way. So I really liked what they were doing, and if you're not familiar, Xealth allows doctors to prescribe programs, education, and mobile apps to patients. It's in the same manner that doctors prescribe like pharmaceuticals and therapeutics right now. So that's going into more of like the digital age of, giving somebody an app instead of, an opioid. And that this company is playing in that space. So that was really interesting, in that when they spun out, UPMC was an investor, Providence was an investor, so cross-country collaboration between health systems, their venture arms, and their innovation groups and startups was, I think, awesome to see.
I should also add that they did have a sleep tech expo during the conference, which was a number of the companies there, which I think gets to Lindsay's point of a lot of non-traditional healthcare companies kind of entering the space and redefining what healthcare looks like.
Yeah, trying to tackle those social determinants of health and, what are really the building blocks of good health, nutrition, sleep, exercise. From a population health standpoint, if you can disrupt those things, that's really where we're going to see dividends in the healthcare system. And
the startup that won the launch event, which was the event that they have every year for the super early stage companies that are launching at the conference, was a company called Suggestic. And when I first heard the pitch, I was totally not bought in. But when they did their demo, which is always when I get sold, when they did their demo, they showed for folks that are on special diets or whatnot, when you go to try to find a restaurant that you can eat in, or you're in the grocery store trying to figure out what you can eat, there's mostly just a lot of like checklist apps or apps that give you a lot of data but don't really tell you how to make a decision. And this one would filter out, if you were on a specific diet, the restaurants that you were looking at, like if you're looking at it on like Yelp, it would only show the ones where there were options for you, or only show the list of items that you could eat at each of those places, and then had the visual recognition if you're in the grocery store to scan things and be able to say yes or no, you can have this. So thinking back onto the closest thing I saw to that, more in a joking way, was the not hot dog on Silicon Valley, HBO Silicon Valley. So this was much more sophisticated than hot dog and not hot dog. And I could see it being helpful in driving behavior change.
So some of the research that we've seen from Rock Health shows that 2017 has been one of the hottest years for venture investment in digital health. We know Google and Apple and others have been investing in that. And over the last few years, investment funding has averaged about $4.5 billion for digital health solutions. But it looks like, at least based on the data through Q2 2017, that this year might completely shatter the prior year averages. You talked a little bit about greater interest and collaboration between health systems and maybe other incumbent players. What other trends do you think are driving the increased interest in digital health solutions? Do you think are consumers clamoring for more of these solutions? What do we think is the change? Why now?
I vote to have our investment expert kick that one off.
Well, I think, first trend is definitely the Googles and the Amazons and the non-traditional healthcare investors entering the space. That's just driving demand for new ideas and technologies. I think within healthcare, we're still far behind other industries in terms of consumer transparency and engagement. So I think there's so much white space there that all these companies, see an opening and an attractive market that they can start to attract new customers towards. And then I'd say, from the health system perspective, a lot of what traditional care is a lot of labor resources, and we're trying to rethink how do you leverage technology to drive efficiencies, to provide care outside of the hospital walls in a way that's sort of sustainable and to kind of create behavior change like Lindsay mentioned. So I think you've got from sort of like the investor, the health system, and the patient, everyone kind of pushing and pulling. That's opening up a large market for new companies that are looking for a space to grow.
Wow, great response.
And I think as you kind of look at the way that we work within healthcare, we look at the patient, a patient portal, a patient appointment, but Facebook, Google, Amazon, Apple, Microsoft, you're not a patient, and so they see engagement with you in a completely different lens. And so, they're able to do things that we don't really need to do today in order to provide the health services that we do, but they know how to deliver on experience. They know how to do a product. They know you, Ben, and, you've got things that may be health-related data, that they have with you. And so you have an identity, they have value in you. And so I think this is, a piece of your life in the health space that they probably think they can service you on. So it's, again, I think it's, they have a relationship with you already, and they don't call you a patient, which is, I think, just they see it from a completely different lens. And so I think they're going to come in from left field in a lot of ways into the healthcare market.
Interesting. Yeah, the angle with which they're engaging you is completely different.
Yeah.
And I think when you have Amazon making moves in Whole Foods, you start to see just how quickly the tides can shift. And so I think one of the things we're starting to see is that there are some companies that now have outcomes that are demonstrating how effective they are. They may solve one piece of the overall puzzle, but there's a couple that may be adjacent to it that if you combine them, you would have more of a total solution. So I think we're seeing more larger investments coming down the pike in the next couple of months of rolling up several solutions that ultimately should work best when combined. So I think we'll see more, I don't know, that's probably Series C, Series B, or just really large B rounds where they're investing a lot of money to bring together disparate solutions so that we're not having, as a health system, we're not having to work with 8 different companies to solve one problem. We're working with one,
And to Lindsay's point earlier about Xealth, I think, at least from the health system perspective, you have companies like Xealth or Redox that are allowing us to be able to use these technologies much more easily than before. It would be kind of a lower priority. Now it's accessible in a very convenient fashion.
Well, I'm going to take it in a different direction. So in one of our water cooler conversations, I think it was last week, one of you mentioned an intriguing question that was planted during the conference. What is a healthcare company today? So tell us a little more about that. We started talking about that a little bit, Michael, when you said that some of these other companies don't see us exactly as patients. They see us as consumers. But are they healthcare companies? So what is a healthcare company today? What did we learn at Health 2.0 about that?
Yeah, I mean, when you kind of look at some of the companies that were at Health 2.0 and some of the products that they did, I mean, they're servicing pieces of if you look at the entire experience that you go through with a doctor's visit, for example. Making an appointment is something that you do within healthcare. You also do it at, Open Table and an airline. And so there's pieces that, the experience that you get with booking an appointment is much better on Open Table than it is with, making it with your provider. And so when you have a company come in and say, we can help you with having a great experience booking an appointment with healthcare, is that is that a new healthcare company or not? They're taking a piece of a process that we have today, and they're servicing our need. And so when they come in and they're not, have grown up from the healthcare industry, does that mean they're a healthcare company or not? I mean, they're doing things that, we find valuable for our consumers. So, it really kind of challenges that, folks out there that are able to provide value to what we need to get done, why wouldn't they be a healthcare company?
Yeah. And Emily, you mentioned there was this all these demos about sleep and sleep products and things like that. In a previous world, would we have considered sleep as a healthcare type of thing? I mean, it's not manufacturing bandages or IV. So is it healthcare? But here it is at Health 2.0.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and I think in a lot of, some of them expanded from like mattresses to just monitoring your sleep cycles. And so I think that
consumer products.
Yeah. A totally different angle than we're used to seeing.
But I think if you're an Amazon or Google, or if you're one of those folks, they're used to processing a ton of data. In the grand scheme of things, healthcare data is a drop in the bucket compared to those folks. And if measuring your sleep could be an early biomarker to other diseases, then who best to solve some of those challenges than the groups that are used to processing a ton of data and finding those little bitty, signals.
And kind of going back to your thing also about how do you define a healthcare company? I think we need to define ourselves in terms of like what makes us a healthcare company as well. Because if you look at Amazon, everybody knows like Amazon says I sell books. Well, people don't see Amazon as a bookseller. You don't see Microsoft as just an office productivity suite, or Apple as the hardware MacBook. I mean, I think they just recently got rid of the iPod, right? I mean, that's gone. They've transitioned to something else. So there are these companies out there that transform. I think it challenges us to transform ourselves as well. And so I think it basically speaks to Health 2.0. The healthcare of the future is not what we're going to be today. And so I think it challenges all of us to really kind of redefine the services that we're offering.
Should members of the, shall I say, old guard healthcare companies, insurance companies, healthcare systems, pharmaceutical companies, should they feel threatened by other companies claiming that they are healthcare companies too?
Absolutely. I think anytime you have consumers that are more now aware of the costs that they're incurring, then you start to see more of a market driven approach or response to some things. And so when things don't make sense to consumers, then they rise up and affect change that way. And so I think all of those industries that have been very complacent, I guess, in understanding what the consumer wants and delivering that, all have a lot to think about right now.
And Cigna was one of the companies there. They had a nice lunch and learn where they looked at, they had a transformation of how they engaged their member. I think they even redefined it from member to something else. But I think they recognize that, if you don't change and you try to meet the customer where they are, you're going to be irrelevant and potentially replaced. And so they're doing a good job of really trying to innovate and to do a better job. And
this seems to be bigger than just healthcare. So when we went out to the Plug and Play demo day and they had companies presenting from mobility and fintech, and the resounding theme from every single one of the corporations that was up there is trying to understand what the consumer wants and being able to deliver that experience. So whether it was the way that the cars are designed these days, instead of it being engineers designing it for engineers, having it be driven by consumers, that's a resounding theme across industries. I don't think healthcare is unique in that.
And I think as consumers can kind of pick and choose what services they want from this expanded market of, the old guard and the new technology companies coming in, it does allow for a lot of areas to collaborate still where they're not quite a direct competitor, because we might provide a different type of care here and then they want Amazon for something else, and you can kind of match some of those together. So I think what's great about Health 2.0 and some of these conversations was that overarching collaboration discussions.
Two more questions. One is just an open question to each of you about your concluding insights, thoughts, learnings that you took away from Health 2.0. just any trends, anything that really stood out to you that you would like our listeners to know. So I'll pick on Michael.
Oh boy.
Good job.
Go ahead and you go first.
What I want people to know about Health 2.0, right? I think what to know about Health 2.0 is there are companies out there that are struggling and looking to solve tomorrow's problems, not only just today, but really to figure out where we're going to be tomorrow, how to solve that. And I think also to what Lindsay and Emily were pointing to earlier is that they don't expect to do it by themselves. They need help doing it, which is why it's exciting to see not only the startups there, but also the health system. There's also the AMA did a session as well. So you have providers and you have insurance carriers in there as well. And everybody's really interested in doing the same thing, which is like, how do we make this whole thing in healthcare better? So it's a great meeting ground, I think, if you want like-minded people that come at it from different angles.
Great summary.
I think the one thing that I come away with it is that if you have the attitude of you're going to be able to do it yourself, then you're going to get left behind. Every single person that we talked to that was making strides was collaborating with startups, was collaborating with payers, was collaborating with other health systems. And so I think we'll see more of that. And if you sit back and just wait for folks to come to you, you're going to get bypassed.
And I'd say the last trend I think I saw, which we've touched on a lot, is that, all these companies are trying to serve the consumer more holistically. And so really asking those questions of like, what does the consumer need and want? And then how do you fit it into a health system's workflows or a technology company's workflows? People are really having more of those conversations and exploring that than I'd seen previously.
And I think the last group I forgot to mention was regulatory bodies like the FDA. We saw many more startups, in the digital health space that had FDA cleared products and solutions, which was, I think, a newer trend that we're starting to see is the scary regulatory bodies of the FDA, which you normally try to avoid. People are embracing those conversations with them more and more now.
Amazing. All right, last question. Describe the Health 2.0 conference in a single word, and then explain why. And since Michael suggested that I ask this question again, I'm going to start with him.
Yeah, I don't know why I suggested that. So the word that I came up with at the time, and I'll go ahead and use it now, is progressive. So whether or not you feel like if you're going there, you are thinking about new solutions to problems, and so you are trying to stretch. And so I think it's a place where, again, a lot of future thinking, a lot of collaboration, a lot of progression happens.
Great. Lindsay.
I would say my word is Disruptivate, which is
do that in Scrabble.
Yeah, hold on. Word. It is a made up word, but I'll give a shout out to whoever made it up, which was Nico from Redox. So before coming to Carolinas, I was at the Texas Medical Center Accelerator in Houston, and Redox was one of our first portfolio companies. And as we were planning out that first cohort, he came up with our hashtag, which was Disruptivate, because we had disruptive innovation on the wall, but the way that the wall was structured, you could, at a certain angle, it looked like disruptivation. And so that's been like our hashtag for anything new and different and crazy. So shout out to Nico for that one. That's still my favorite.
Hashtag Disruptivate.
Yeah.
Emily.
I would say a launch pad, and I think that's because you're seeing a lot of early stage technologies that really get their first pitch to a lot of investors and consumers and health systems right there.
Good one.
Yeah.
Very good. Well, Lindsay, Michael, Emily, it's been really fun having you in the podcast studio. We'll have you again soon, but thank you so much for sharing your perspectives.
Thanks, Ben.
Thanks, Ben.
Thanks for having us.
Awesome. Well, join us on our next series of episodes coming soon to iTunes and Google Play. You may have seen some activity. Well, you definitely have seen some activity in your news feed regarding Amazon, Google, and Apple's intentions to make a move into the healthcare industry. But listen in as we use our disruptive innovation lenses to break down their strategies, as well as the implications for incumbent healthcare players. This is Ben Tingy. See you later, folks.